The German government is launching an all-out attack on workers' rights by forcing workers to get sick notes for even those most minor of ailments. If you can't get to work for just one day because you have a cold or a migraine or back pain, you have to go to the doctors first, assuming you can even get an appointment. That's the claim I've seen going around the internet, but is it true? Well, the short answer is partly, but it's probably not quite as bad as you think it might be. The long answer is the rest of this video. I should explain for the benefit of those of you in countries that are not quite so enlightened with their workers' rights that the basic principle in Germany and Europe in general is that if you're sick, and you can't go to work if you're sick. Employers aren't allowed to give a maximum number of sick days after which you have to take it out of your vacation. We don't do that here. At the moment, if you're not well enough to work, your employer cannot force you to work. If your sickness lasts for more than 3 days, you need an official note from a doctor stating how long you're likely to be unable to work. The reason for this is very simple. Suppose you work for me, and one morning you wake up with a headache, a sore throat, and a head full of catarrh. It's likely just a cold. Unpleasant, but it should only last a couple of days. I don't want you coming into the office unable to concentrate properly because that's bad for productivity. I definitely don't want you infecting everybody else in the office. I need you to get better as soon as possible, and for that it's best if you just rest up for a bit. And I also don't want you sitting for an hour in a doctor's waiting room where you're likely to become infected with something worse and have to take 10 days off. So it's actually in both our interests if you just stay at home, rest for a day or two and see what happens. If you get better, then you can come back to work. If you don't, then you go and see a doctor because it might be something more serious. However, the law also says that an employer may demand a sick note earlier. Some employers do this as a matter of course, and if that's the kind of employer that you work for, there's not a lot you can do about that. But it's really there for those cases where there is reasonable grounds to suspect that this person isn't really sick. I once knew somebody who was very often off sick and almost always on a Monday, and the rumour was that he liked to spend his Sunday evenings in the local nightclub dancing with girls half his age. And this actually leads us on to the government's new proposal, which has recently been announced. And the first thing to notice is that I said proposal there. This is, in fact, one of a whole package of proposals that the government has announced with the aim of trying to fix the economy. One of the problems that the government apparently sees is that too many people are taking advantage of the current law and taking time off work that they're not entitled to. This makes Germany unattractive for employers, and this, we are told, is one reason that the economy is in such a mess. The current government is a coalition between the union, which traditionally represents the interests of capitalists and landowners, and the SPD, which traditionally represents the interests of workers. And so it's not surprising that the idea that we all have to get tough and work harder comes from the union, which happens to be Chancellor Friedrich Merz's party. The whole package is, by the way, a bit of a disappointment. Everybody can agree on the need for reform. Nobody is able to agree on exactly what reforms are needed. After days of apparently very fierce arguing, the two parties finally announced a historic agreement and presented their proposals. As it turns out, these reforms just represent the few things the two parties were able to agree on. It's less of a reform and more of a series of tweaks. But what has really caught the attention of the press and the working class people of Germany in general is a proposal to amend the law on sick notes. The proposal is to change it so that sick notes will be required from the first day. Because this is a proposal and not an actual bill, it doesn't contain very much in the way of detail. It's really nothing more than just the government's to-do list. So immediately, trade unions, medical associations, and all sorts of other people raised serious questions about what exactly is going to happen if doctors, already struggling with more work than they can actually handle, have to see every single case of the sniffles. When he was asked about this in an interview, Merz gave an answer that really just added to the confusion. Nobody would be forced to go to the doctor on day one, he said, but everybody would be expected to provide a sick note from day one. This was a particularly puzzling answer because another proposal was to abolish sick notes by telephone. This was introduced during the pandemic when having lots of people in waiting rooms was not only less than ideal, but actually a contravention of pandemic restrictions. So if that's been abolished, how are people supposed to get a sick note if they don't go to the doctors? Nobody knows, but it has been noted that while the proposal talks about sick notes by telephone, it says nothing at all about video links. So maybe that will still be allowed. And there is another thing that might give workers hope. There is a principle that, unless expressly forbidden, employers are free to deviate from the law if this benefits their employees. In other words, if it states in your contract that you can wait until after the third day before getting a sick note, then what is in your contract effectively overrides the law. It is considered unlikely that any law that is passed will forbid any deviation, in which case very little actually changes. At the moment, the law says that a sick note is needed from day 4 unless otherwise agreed. In future, it might just say that a sick note is required from day 1 unless otherwise agreed. But this is just a proposal, and many members of the SPD aren't particularly happy with it. The next argument is going to be over the wording of the draft legislation, which then has to be debated, amended and voted on in the Bundestag before it can become law. That's not likely until early next year, by which time the text may have changed quite a lot. It's quite possible that this particular proposal never even makes it into the law at all, which means that this will all have been a complete waste of time. Click down there if you'd like to see another of my videos, and if you'll excuse me, I'm actually not feeling too well at the moment. I need to give my boss a call. Oh, hang on. I'm self-employed. I am my boss. Huh.